Welcome to the Madison Miller podcast. This afternoon's guest is someone who hasn't been on probably since the summer. He covers the Knicks. He used to cover the Liberty. It's Geoff Magliocchetti. How are you on this Saturday afternoon?
Madison Miller, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. All right, so the biggest story in sports this week was not the Super Bowl being this week. Kevin Durant is no longer a Brooklyn Net. He is now playing in the city where the Super Bowl resides, in Phoenix, and he got traded to the Suns. How surprised were you that the Nets, after the Kyrie trade, went and traded Kevin Durant, or did you think it was going to be held off until the summer potentially?
You know, I was a little surprised because I felt that either way, Durant had kind of almost outlived any quote-unquote usefulness either side had for each other, because without Kyrie, Brooklyn was probably kicked out of what I like to call the penthouse of NBA contenders and more or less relegated to the not, I don't want to say also rants, but they probably weren't going to contend for a title. That penthouse, of course, now being occupied by the Bostons, the Milwaukees, the Philadelphias. But to kickstart this quote unquote rebuild process immediately works best for both sides, because Durant can basically go in and be almost what I like to call Winston Wolf type deal, where he basically cleans up any lingering issues that a contending team has. We saw that in Golden State previously, of course, and basically is able to lead them to the title. So it's going to be really interesting to see what he can do in Phoenix. And Brooklyn, for their part, came out reasonably well in this trade, reasonably well as one could, considering the difficult circumstances and situations out there. They do have some solid building blocks, which they obtained in the form of draft picks, in the form of Cam Johnson, in the form of Mikal Bridges. So all in all, it could have been worse for Brooklyn, but at the same time, this does close another disappointing chapter in the history of the Brooklyn Nets. But I'm sure, Madison, as a New Jersey native, as a fellow New Jersey native, I'm sure our sympathies lie only with the fans and not the team of themselves at this point.
Right. They lie with the fans for sure. I know many Nets fans that have been fans of the Nets since the New Jersey Nets. I feel for those fans. I really do. And one of them being a fellow guest of the podcast, Jeff Burns, who's been on several times. I think you follow him on Twitter. He's a Nets fan. He does the horse stuff. He's a Nets fan too, so I feel bad for him. I gotta have him on. I know he would go on a little bit of a potential tangent. Meanwhile, the Knicks made a small move, trading first-round pick protected, I should say, top 14 protected, with Cam Reddish for Josh Hart. What do you make of that small move to help the Knicks a little bit?
Yeah, I do have to applaud the Knicks' restraint at both the trade deadline and during the offseason as well, because the Knicks could have fallen into a sort of oblivion that the Nets more or less became. Because I find it interesting that if I think we've talked about on this program before how there's almost like in this town there appears to be a Jets tax and a Knicks tax, where anything, the slightest issue that goes wrong with either the Knicks or the Jets, and to the New York Mets for a lesser extent too, that problem is amplified 40-fold, because making fun of these teams seem to generate clicks. And if anything like this happened to the Knicks, we would hear about it from now till rapture. So I have to applaud the Knicks a little bit, because there was going to be no move at this trade deadline that would allow the Knicks to move into the so-called Eastern Conference penthouse. In fact, we saw that last night, because they got off to a very solid start against Philadelphia last night, but looked lost in the second half. And Josh Hart isn't going to be someone that puts them into the cusp of contention, but at the same time, I think Josh Hart is a player who can help solidify the top six. If there's one thing even the stingiest Knicks haters cannot say about this team is not boring. I feel like they played one-possession games almost every single night. No game ever feels truly over in Knicksland until 0.0 is on the scoreboard. And they're sitting very pretty as is right now, especially compared to the nonsense that happened last season. They're sitting very pretty right now. I believe entering Saturday action, they are still indeed at the top of the play-in tournament. The Knicks, of course, playing Utah over MSG tonight. So I have to pray. They're sitting pretty, and they could have gone for something that could have been a true quote unquote game changer. Something like the rumored move that would have traded 3 first-round picks over to Toronto for OG Anunoby. But at the same time, I applaud their restraint because the Knicks are being more patient right now. This is New York, and nobody likes to rebuild, and it's especially hated in New York. So the Knicks are kind of biding their time right now. Jalen Brunson has been the answer to everything and then some. If they were to trade a multitude of first rounders for someone like Anunoby and also at the same time in the offseason trade the farm for Donovan Mitchell, I remember, everyone was on the table in that trade. Everyone not named Brunson, RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes. If they did that, they would have hit fast forward on the latest iteration of the seemingly eternal Knicks rebuild. But patience is paying off. If they can, take advantage of a downtrodden Nets team right now and move into the top 6 and secure a spot, that could be a solid sign to contenders and to both contenders and potential free agents that something good is being built here. And of course, we also have to give a shout out to the efforts of All-Star Julius Randle, who was recovered very well from last year's roller coaster campaign. So I gotta say, I applaud the Knicks' relative restraint at this deadline.
Yeah, I'm with you there. The Knicks didn't go crazy. I would have. I don't know what I would have done if they traded 3 unprotected picks for OG and Anunoby. That would have been wild. That guy's never made an All-Star team. That's no disrespect to OG. I think he's a great player. But I don't know if he would have fit the Knicks. I mean, they did need the wing. I mean, I don't mind the Josh Hart move, but I think that OG was sitting there for some other contenders like the Memphis and New Orleans and maybe even Cleveland. But Cleveland gave up everything for Donovan Mitchell. The one team that disappointed me at the trade deadline was the Cleveland Cavaliers. I thought they had the upgrade at small forward. Is there a team that kind of disappointed you at the trade deadline in terms of that team should have went for it a little bit more?
I mean, you could look at the Western Conference, for example, and see several teams that maybe should have tried to solidify their ends a little bit, especially after Phoenix shocked the world with their trade of Kevin Durant at the literal wee hours of Thursday morning. So I feel like some teams in the West probably could have done a little more, kind of open that up a little bit. It's nothing compared to say where we were in, I think it was November, December, where basically 1st and 12th in the West were separated by 7 or 8 games. But I feel that some teams in the West could have done maybe just a little more. You mentioned the Memphises. I would have liked to see Sacramento kind of do a little more at the deadline, because the Kings, of course, on their first playoff run in literal years, and we're keeping an eye on it here in the tri-state area, because if they make the playoffs this year, then the Jets have the longest playoff drought amongst the 4 major professional sports, I believe. No, I believe that might belong to the Sabres. Either way, in New York, we're keeping it. Either way, in the literal New York area, we will be keeping an eye on it. So I feel that maybe some teams in the West could have done a little more to kind of solidify themselves in what is admittedly a wide open division. I know Dallas has a healthy 3.5 game lead on Memphis right now for the top seed in the West, and 6.5 games up on third place Sacramento. But at the same time, maybe they could have done just a tad more to kind of solidify themselves, because I know the Nuggets have looked great this year. Nikola Jokic looks like he could be on pace for another MVP award, but at the same time, people don't trust them yet because they haven't had that sort of success in the playoffs. They seem to wilt come postseason time. So I feel that maybe some teams in the West, and Denver's far from the only one, by all means. Denver is far from the only team that could have done maybe a tad more to kind of boost themselves a little bit. I was a little shocked we didn't see more of a plethora of activity out in the West. Phoenix's Kevin Durant gambit notwithstanding. Although Phoenix put themselves in win now mode for sure, because you look at that roster, and if they can't win with that lineup once Durant is fully healthy, it might never happen for them.
Yeah, exactly. And the Suns, to me, had to make a drastic move, whether it was a Kevin Durant trade or the other way, to try to maybe trade DeAndre Ayton for some other pieces. But I do applaud the Suns for going out and getting Kevin Durant. So let's go to a different basketball team in a different league, the WNBA. Back to the Barclays Center we go. The Liberty improved themselves by signing Brianna Stewart and Courtney Vandersloot. My goodness, is this the team to beat in the WNBA, or do you still think Vegas or somebody else?
I mean, look, right now it's a toss. I'm going to give Vegas the slight advantage right now, if only because they have the advantage of continuity and familiarity with each other, and that's something that was addressed when Stewart and Vandersloot addressed the New York media for the first time on Thursday. It was quite a bittersweet day over the Barclays Center on Thursday, considering that Durant had just been traded. And Vandersloot and Stewart were just being introduced hours after that trade happened. So a very bittersweet day at the Barclays Center for all the Brooklyn basketball fans out there. So, like I said, I think that Vegas's slight edge in terms of the group that they have now has won before. The group they have now has done great things with this group. The Asia Wilsons, the Jackie Youngs, the Kelsey Plums. This team has won before, and I know they made some additions. The Candace Parkers out there. I know they kind of upgraded a little bit. So at the same time, I feel like that chemistry works to their advantage, and I think that gives them the edge right now. Of course, this is why we play the games. And you look at New York right now, and obviously a lot of attention is going to the signings that you mentioned, unless we forget John Quill Jones, who was acquired and traded with the Connecticut Sun. I feel that you look at the Liberty right now, there are some names that we almost forget about this. No one's going to forget Sabrina Ionescu, but one name I think people are forgetting is Benaja Laney out there. We forget that Benaja Laney dragged herself up from the depths of WNBA roster oblivion, appearing on, I want to say, about 4 different teams in maybe 3 or 4 different years. But then when it came to playing in the Bradenton bubble, she takes home a most improved player. She puts forth a most improved player outfit, signs with the Liberty, and more or less helps take over the team during the 2021 season when Ionescu was still finding her WNBA legs a little bit. Got to give credit to Sammy Whitcomb and Vince Van too, who was, of course, one of the sacrifices made in pursuit of a so-called super team. So I give Las Vegas the edge for right now, but of course this is why we play the games. And New York has situated itself very well in this case by for all intents and purposes, you never know what's going to happen in the WNBA. Especially by what's transpired over the past few weeks. New York has situated themselves on pretty solid ground with Ionescu, with not just Ionescu, but also Laney, and also head coach Sandy Brondello, who jokingly stated she's worked with the super team before her first year in Phoenix back in, I want to say, I think it was 2014. So they've situated themselves real well in this spot. They have some solid role depth. I'm particularly intrigued by the rookie contract bestowed to Sika Cone, who a Mali native who was chosen in the third round of the draft last year. She put forth some very solid efforts for Mali in the FIBA Women's World Cup. So a super team, it's ironic. A super team is only as good as its role players, and I feel that New York has situated themselves well in that regard with whoever will be left from this gambit. And so again, right now, Vegas has the slight edge, but New York has situated itself in a perfect spot to kind of take advantage and really contend with Vegas and really make some noise on the WNBA level, especially after kind of taking their lumps and paying their dues over the past half decade.
Yeah, so I'm proud of the Liberty for pulling off those moves. Those are awesome, and they never used to make those big moves like this. The last big move they made, I'd say, was probably the Tina Charles trade, and then it's been a long time since they had big moves like this. So I'm excited to watch them this year. And now we go back to the Garden, where another trade was made on the day of the NBA trade deadline. The Rangers make the biggest deal in Madison Square Garden, acquiring Vladimir Tarasenko from the Blues. I was so fired up over this trade. They did not give up much at all. Sammy Blaze, a first, a fourth, and a defenseman that's playing in Hartford. I think I blanking on his name, but I think the Rangers did a great job with this trade.
For sure. Hunter Skinner was that defenseman's name, by the way. And I think you're absolutely right. people are going to look at that trade as, a bit of a rental case. But I think that's fine, especially considering what they gave away, which, as you said, not that much. And those picks are conditional as well. And the first rounder they're giving up is going to be whatever's lower from either their original pick or the pick they obtained in the Nils Lundqvist trade with the Dallas Stars. So the Rangers did not give up much at all. There's a very interesting debate about rentals in the NHL and what you have to give up. And the Rangers, when they brought in, I think you're going to see a lot of comparisons to the Martin St. Louis trade made back in 2014. The Rangers gave up a lot in that trade, including their captain, Ryan Callahan. So that was a trade that eventually kind of benefited both sides, in the fact that Tampa started to get pieces for what they're building now. The Rangers were able to make a cup run of their own and several other successful seasons. So I feel that this could not have worked out better for the Rangers. St. Louis, of course, is also paying Tarasenko's salary, and is a bit of and really helps Chris Drury to rectify one of the biggest mistakes he's had of his tenures thus far, trading Pavel Buchnevich for Sammy Blais. I think a pick might have been involved in that. My memory escapes me at the moment, but I feel that this is very interesting for them. Now, the question is going to be whether that's enough to contend with Boston, who appears to be on one heck of a run right now. We'll see if that's able to continue in the post All-Star break session. But the hockey playoffs are different in the sense that that's the one postseason where it feels like literally anything can happen. I also think the Rangers are almost cursed by playing in the Metropolitan Division, because they've won 4 in a row. They've won 5 of 6, and yet I believe they've lost playoff ground, because the Metropolitan Division is so cutthroat, so unforgiving, that everybody wins, and even the losses when they play each other turn out to be 3-point games. You have the Carolinas, you have the surprising Devils who refuse to go away. You have also the long-term guys who refuse to go away in Pittsburgh and Washington. And some talented teams are going to wind up missing the playoffs at the end of the day. I feel you're going to see the Islanders just picking up Bo Horvat. That seemed to put a pep in their step recently in beating Seattle. You go over to the Atlantic Division. The top 3 seems pretty solidified in Boston, Toronto, and Tampa. You're going to see some talented teams like Florida, Buffalo, even Detroit, who's up on 2-0 right now in Vancouver. You're going to see some talented, young, exciting teams miss the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and it just stinks, because you look at the Rangers right now. They would be leading the Pacific Division if they were situated on the opposite coast. So I feel that adding a name like Tarasenko and not giving up much for it, we saw how it kind of energized the team last night. You look at Temi Panarin. His friendship with Tarasenko looked great. Capo Kakko even looked energized by adding another Finn in the trade, another Finland native in Nico Mikkola, who took over as a third-line defenseman. So I feel that this trade is really going to help the Rangers moving forward. And we saw how far they could go with rentals last year, namely those of Frank Petrano, Tyler Mott, and Andrew Kopp.
Yes, those are 3 big rentals that helped them go to the conference finals last year, especially Andrew Kopp. He was a really good top 6 guy for them. And I love the Tarasenko deal. Did you see what Patrick Kane said, by the way?
I did see that. It seems very sour grapes. I didn't want Patrick Kane by any stretch of the imagination in New York. What were his exact words, by the way? What were his words on that? I know he seemed... All I can define it was sour grapes. You have to have his exact words on you.
It wasn't. I don't know the exact wording, but I'm gonna paraphrase what he said. He was pretty much like, "Yeah, I wanted to be traded to the Rangers."
Yeah. I feel that first of all, you put the health issues aside for the moment. Adding Patrick Kane, to me anyway, would have seemed like such a turn of the century Rangers move to do, where they were basically getting anyone who appeared on a cover of an EA Sports late 90s, early aughts video game and putting them on the team. Guys like Eric Lindros, guys like Pavel Bure. They even brought Mark Messier back for a de facto retirement tour. That move was screamed New Century Rangers to me. Somewhat, and I know there's the Panarin connection. I know that that once upon a time they dominated the Windy City. They dominated with Chicago. But Kane also carries the negative baggage of the the Blackhawks assault scandal that we saw a couple of years back. That seems like forever ago, but tragically it's just so recent. I feel that that kind of unwanted baggage, and it's just unwanted, and I missed the part really where the Rangers are supposed to quote unquote care about Patrick Kane's feelings, by the way. So if he and he's more than welcome to feel that way. Freedom of speech, it's America after all. I feel that this shows this kind of more or less proves that they dodged a bullet, kind of. And you don't need that when you're when you're in prime territory for a relatively stable and potentially deep playoff run. And I think Tarasenko puts you on better track to do that right now than Patrick Kane does. So I applaud the Rangers for kind of again showing the sense of restraint that is helping the Knicks right now, helping the Knicks build something sustainable. So I applaud them in that regard. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Rangers made another move. Maybe Timo Meier is going to be a little too much right now, but for all intents and purposes, I would be more than happy to let bygones be bygones with Patrick Kane.
Yeah, Patrick Kane is somebody I always liked as a player, but to me, like you said, he was involved in that scandal, and I feel like he's a player that's production has gone down. He's having health problems, too. I thought the Rangers kind of needed somebody of, that type of caliber, but it ended up being Tarasenko, and, I'm happy with Tarasenko, and I think Tarasenko's a better fit than Patrick Kane, but I wasn't sure what the Blues, or if the Blues were going to trade him or not, and they're awful this year. So, Ryan O'Reilly's going to be next on the move. I think Carolina would be a great spot for Ryan O'Reilly. Do you have any other teams in mind for Ryan O'Reilly?
Oh, man. Wow, it's a good look. At this point, what contender wouldn't like Ryan O'Reilly on their team? He's a leader. He's still contributing, especially at advanced age, especially at a relatively advanced age in the NHL. I feel like Carolina could work really well with him, but of course, from our personal bias perspectives, we don't want to see Carolina get better. It's the last thing they read right now.
Right.
I also feel that perhaps a reunion with Buffalo could be something that pushes them in the right direction. I'm not entirely sure what Buffalo's cap and trade picture looks like for time being, but they're on the cusp of something very special over there. And O'Reilly could also potentially, I think he could fit in with Colorado too. Colorado kind of struggling in their championship defense a little bit. I feel that the Avalanche could really work with them over there. Man, the idea of O'Reilly in Buffalo intrigues me because the Sabres are just such a fun watch. They're at or near the top right now. What I like to call my NHL center ice rankings. It's like an out of market team that isn't on national TV often, but you flock to either center ice or ESPN Plus to see their games on a relatively nightly basis. So I feel that that'd be a lot of fun. And you don't count out Toronto either. I feel like that could be another dark horse candidate that could work out over there. And Toronto's farm system is relatively desirable too. I feel that they could really offer St. Louis something good, especially if the Blues opt to embrace a full-on rebuild at this point in time. Because you're right, the Blues have been one of the bigger disappointments in the NHL this season. As they take a look at the standings, they're 9 points out, but I feel that the numerical deficit isn't the problem with them. It's the fact that they have to leapfrog also Nashville and Calgary just to be the first team out at this point. I don't see them. I know the Central is relatively weak. Colorado currently holding the last of the three automatic playoff spots there with a mere 58 points, which would, again, only place St. Louis 9 points back. But that's asking a lot of that team at this point, especially reeling from the loss of Tarasenko. So if they opt for a full-on rebuild, they will get a very nice haul for Ryan O'Reilly. I think teams that could really embrace that sort of deal would be Toronto, Buffalo, Carolina, and Colorado.
Yeah, I forgot about Colorado, too. They need some help, obviously, if they want to try to repeat there. Let's switch over to a team that we like to discuss when I have you on, the Seton Hall Pirates.
Yes,
college basketball. They are on the bubble as we speak right now, according to some of the bracketologists out there, like Joe Lenardi and Jerry Palm and people like that. At gunpoint, do you think they are NIT or tournament bound?
Oh my goodness, this got violent in a hurry. But I think that for the time being, I would put them. Oh my goodness! Wow! Man, I love this time of year. I just love this time of year with the tournament resumes and whatnot. For the time being, I am going to keep them out right now because I feel like they need a win over UConn is great. I feel if they had beaten Creighton on Wednesday, I would have been more willing to put them in. But at the same time, I feel they're getting it. They're getting there. They feel like a flavor of the month team right now for the time being. But at the same time, there is a dangerous stretch. There is a dangerous couple of games coming up for them. They're at Villanova tonight. Villanova's interesting. I have a bias towards Villanova personally because quick little story for you, Madison. No Villanova, no me. My parents met at Villanova, so if not for the Wildcats, I don't exist.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
But Villanova's an interesting team because they have a losing record right now. I believe at least 10 of their 13 losses in the first year of the Kyle Neptune era have come by single digits. So Villanova is so hot and cold right now, you don't know what's going to happen out there in Philadelphia tonight. And then Georgetown, who's been another team that has a drastically horrendous losing record, but at the same time, they have given teams their all on a nightly basis. And Seton Hall has done relatively well in not only winning the games that they're supposed to, they have done so in convincing fashion. Since the calendar year flip, they have been this is all sandwiched by losses to Creighton. But since the calendar flipped to 2023, you have a 25-point win over Butler. You got a 15-point win over Georgetown. Narrowly beaten DePaul. You got that 1-point win over UConn. Losing by 21 to Marquette. Another 21-point win over Butler. 12-point win over St. John's, and another narrow win against DePaul, who was another team giving all they got this year. So I feel like if Seton Hall really wants to impress the voters, they have 6 games left on their schedule. You have to get through Villanova and Georgetown unscathed. Then you have 2 more prime opportunities against UConn and Xavier. Then the season ends by hosting Villanova on the 28th and then closing things at Providence. If you go 4-2 in that stretch, you can really make a case. If you go 5-1 in that stretch, I think that you really impress the voters and you can avoid the quote-unquote first 4 entirely. It's going to depend on what happens nationally as well. But at the same time, Seton Hall does strike. Seton Hall right now could be either a flavor of the month or the quote-unquote one team you don't want to face in March. It's up to them over these next 6 games to decide what they're going to be.
Yes, and they got to at least win a couple in the Big East tournament, too. You can't forget about the all-important conference tournament. I know some people find that to be overrated, but I think it's important because I remember a couple of times there were teams that got hot in the conference tournaments and then made the tournaments and were bid stealers because they made it to the Final Four of their conference tournament. So, Seton Hall could be one of those teams. You never know.
I mean, hey, look at Georgetown a couple of years back. They had a losing record entering the Big East tournament and ended up winning the whole thing and, like you said, stealing that bid. So, and you look at the Big East right now, as we're speaking, St. John's is up 11 on Providence at this point in time, and that's all for the course of the Big East. Your listeners are smart enough to know that this Big East is a dangerous conference and things can change at the drop of a hat. So I feel that there's just a prime opportunity for the Pirates right now. I think something that would go a long way in terms of convincing voters is securing one of the conference tournament buys. Top 5 teams get a bye in the new look Big East conference. Of course, with UConn's recent re-entry, that takes away the 6th bye. So you get in that top 5 teams. Seton Hall currently holds the last one right now, tied with UConn, though they do own that vital tiebreaker. If they get one of those top 5 buys, that should be not only a realistic goal, but something that can really go a long way in impressing voters come Selection Sunday.
Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears to NASCAR. The season starts next weekend. Yours truly will be attending the Daytona 500, as I told you the other day. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will certainly tweet out some pictures as I'm down there in a week. And let's talk about the leagues this year. We'll start the Cup Series, obviously. Do you think there's going to be any change in terms of drivers that can make a big leap or any potential breakout or guys can make the leap, or even guys that are getting older could potentially like dip a little bit. Like guys like Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch, I feel like have been around forever. And
no, you're absolutely. Oh, sorry.
And even Kyle Busch, I noticed, has a new number. So yeah, let's do a roundabout a little bit about NASCAR, about the Cup Series first.
Roundabout, I like what you did there. Kyle Busch, you're absolutely right. He does have a new number. He is driving the number 8 now for Richard Childress Racing. That car previously piloted by Tyler Reddick, who moved over to Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin's team over at 2311. He'll be driving the 45, taking over for the retired Kurt Busch. And I gotta say, I'm feeling a little resentful as you mentioned all these names. It's making me feel old hearing Denny Hamlin and guys getting up to that age. So what are you doing to me? Come on now. But and funny you should mention that too, because Kevin, this will be the final season for Kevin Harvick, who of course is about to end what is by far one of the most brilliant careers in NASCAR history. When you think about what he had to go through in 2001, replacing Dale Earnhardt in the rebranded number 3 car, again for Richard Childress. It rebranded number 3 car upon his tragic passing at the end of the 01 500, and for him to immediately burst on the scene, holding off Jeff Gordon, I believe was his 4th career start at Atlanta for the win, and just dominating any level of NASCAR he's been. He will be missed, and it will be a true end of an era, because upon Harvick's retirement, there will be no drivers left from the so-called quote Winston Cup era, that era of course ending in 2003 with the addition of Nextel, which later became Sprint and later gave way to Monster Energy, to what is now simply the NASCAR Cup Series. So one driver, let's get a little more positive for the record. I'm hard myself here, but one driver there are 2 drivers that really stand out to me, 2 guys who can really make leaps and bounds this year, and that would be A.J. Allmendinger riding in the 16 for Colleague Racing, and Eric Jones in the 43. I have a bit of a bone to pick with Eric Jones in the sense that I had him pegged for the playoffs last year, and he misses it. Then the first playoff race, he goes out and wins with Darlington. So I was like, what are you doing, Eric? Come on. But there is a lot of momentum going around over at the organization formerly known as Richard Petty Motorsports, now known as the Legacy Racing Club. I feel that there's the momentum has been propelled them forward in the fact that Jones secured a win in the 43, which I believe was the first win in a full-time race for a car numbered 43, the iconic 43, of course, owned and overseen, made famous by Richard Petty, the king himself. I feel there's a lot of positive momentum over there in the sense because that you had Jones in the 43, you had a Rookie of the Year contender in Noah Gragson in the 42, and you're going to have 7-time series champion Jimmy Johnson making some part-time starts in the number 84. So that's someone I really want to keep an eye on for sure. A.J. Allmendinger, on the other hand, I really want to keep an eye on too, because Colleague Racing made the leap into NASCAR last year with Justin Haley driving 31 full-time. And I feel, and they had some growing pains, which is expected from a Xfinity team moving on to the big level. But Allmendinger really, he kind of struggled in his first go around with NASCAR. He's perhaps most famous for his win in JTG Daugherty's number 47, the team owned by Jordan's former teammate Brad Daugherty. He went over at Watkins Glen a few years back, but he really started to redeem himself by taking over one of the cars in Colleague's Xfinity Series endeavors. So he really started to rewrite the narrative on himself, and it kind of reminded me of what Elliott Sadler did. Elliott Sadler had some good times at the Cup level, struggled a little bit, moved back to the Xfinity Series, dominated that level, and really kind of rewrote the narrative on his career there. And I felt that was an opportunity for Allmendinger to play it safe a little bit, but at the same time, he could really make some noise, especially with the number of road courses we see on the Cup circuit today. I believe it was the second race. It was one of the early races of last season. He had a chance to win. I think it was at the Circuit of the Americas, and he was fighting for the win with Ross Chastain. Of course, he became one of many drivers to put Ross Chastain on his vengeance list. So I really think, but at the same time, that was some really positive momentum for a guy who was going to make his full-time Cup Series return this year. So I would not be surprised by any stretch of the imagination if AJ Allmendinger not only reached the playoffs but advanced around.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. AJ Allmendinger, I remember he was in the Nationwide series last year. So that makes sense for him to like make that jump. And speaking of the Nationwide series, is there any drivers you have your eye on in that league this year?
Oh, yeah,
Xfinity.
For sure. Xfinity, that's right. That for sure on that. Because we saw last year, we saw a lot of really talented, really good drivers kind of miss out on the Xfinity Series playoffs last year, and of course we saw Ty Gibbs break through. And when Gibbs, of course, is moving on to Cup Series endeavors in the rebranded Up 18 car, he will now drive the number 54 for Joe Gibbs Racing. So that should be interesting to see. And he's a guy who's had some attitude too. But I want to keep an eye on the endeavors over at Stewart-Haas Racing. Cole Custer, who drove the Cup Series 41 for the past couple of years, kind of struggled. Did get a win during his rookie season at Kentucky, made a surprise playoff run in that car, but really struggled last season. And now I really appreciate what Stewart-Haas did with Cole, in the sense that we've seen so many drivers kind of be hyped as the next big thing. Oh, he's the next Jeff Gordon. He's the next big thing. They'll do it. He'll move on. He's the it guy. And when they struggle, they immediately give up on the poor kid. But I appreciate what Stewart-Haas Racing has done. Not only have they retained Custer, sent him back down to the Xfinity Series to kind of work on his racing a little bit, work on his confidence, get his confidence back up again. But he is also now, I feel anyway, in prime position to succeed Kevin Harvick in the 4 car. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on. And SHR's other car is the 98 of Riley Herbst, who kind of impressed some people last year. He's struggled to get to victory. He struggled to get to a victory lane, but really did a solid job of remaining in contention all last year. Closed the year with 3 consecutive top 10 finishes, and really started to put that program in the right direction. Herbst, by the way, will be making his Cup debut, or at least he's locked in via charter. He'll be making his Cup debut at Daytona 500, driving the number 15 for Rick Ware Racing. And someone else I want to keep an eye on too is over at Joe Gibbs Racing. The team still exists over in the Xfinity Series, and I want to keep an eye on Sammy Smith, who displayed some promise last year during a handful of starts in the Xfinity Series last year. Ran 9 races out there. Had some things not go his way, but put up 3 top 10s in the in what basically amounts to Gibbs's all-star car. Really had some great success at the ARCA Series last year, and I feel that while he's a rookie, he'll be really someone to keep an eye on. So I feel like those guys should really pace things forward. And again, we're going to see some talented guys left out of the picture right now. I mean, last year we had to see the Truck Series champion Sheldon Creed miss the playoffs by the skin of his teeth last year. So I feel he and Austin Hill, the two of them driving the Creed in the 2 and Hill in the 21 over at RCR, are really going to be guys to keep an eye on this year. So there's no rest for NASCAR fans once again yet another year. I feel that there's really going to be something interesting to see. And that doesn't even account for the fact that Kyle Busch will be returning to the Xfinity Series to run a handful of races this year, doing so with the aforementioned Kaulig as they turn their number 10 into kind of a mishmash of all-star drivers taking over that car. So should be a real interesting stretch of races in the Xfinity this year.
All right, and very quickly, the Truck Series. Is there any drivers that you think could make a jump in that league that could potentially work their way up?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're seeing a lot of contention there too. I think we started to see several of the lesser known drivers. You're going to see Zane Smith, the defending champion. He'll return in Front Row Motorsports 38. I think you got to keep an eye on him. Smith will be running for Tricon Garage, sharing the 17 with Taylor Gray. Corey Heim is all Taylor Gray, excuse me. Corey Haim also in there in the 11 over at Tricon, so that should be interesting as well. So I feel that this is also going to be an interesting year for Haley Deegan over at Dorsport last year. She'll be running a handful of Xfinity Series racing as well. Ooh. So it'll be interesting to see if she's able to kind of get on the level of her teammates, Ty Majeski, Matt Craft, and Ben Rhodes, all of whom have had success over in Dorsports Ford. So should be interesting to see there. Don't forget Matt DiBenedetto in the 25 there. And Kyle Busch, once again, running Kyle Busch Motorsports. He'll be back in the 51 for 5 races this year. Chase Elliott is playing to run Daytona in the 35, so enjoy that. Make it out there if you can. So, and I think the driver to truly keep an eye on this year is Carson Hocevar in the 42. Again, another guy who ran into some hard luck last year, didn't make it to victory lane, but did post 8 top 5 finishes, including 3 runner-up finishes. I think he's going to be really hungry to prove to the world, especially after a disappointing playoff stretch that left him in 10th place in the standings. He'll be someone to truly keep an eye on. So I think he might be my pick to win it all this year. Carson Hocevar in the 42 for Nice Sports.
Alrighty, yeah, Haley Deegan I think is the most interesting driver in the Truck Series for the reasons you mentioned. I like seeing female drivers, obviously, and I can't help but think about Danica Patrick. I remember at Daytona 500. Do you remember which one it was? She got the pole. I remember she got the pole one year.
2013, I believe.
Yes, that would make sense, and it was like stunning that she got the pole. And then it's just so funny that, like, I just have this vivid memory of Danica Patrick getting the pole. So hopefully Haley Deegan and her team have success. All right, last thing. The Super Bowl is tomorrow.
Can I just say one thing about Danica Patrick?
What was that?
Can I just say one thing about Danica Patrick real quick?
Go ahead.
I think Danica has a complicated NASCAR legacy in that she did accomplish so much for NASCAR's push to see more female drivers in here. It's just unfortunate that I think her journey was somewhat forced. Not in the sense that they were trying to do anything nefarious, but they tried to make it happen too quickly. If Danica Patrick had longer time to work with in, say, the Xfinity Series, I don't think she ran a full Xfinity Series season before making the jump to Cup. So I feel she had more time down there, and she's far from the only one. I just think it's a bit unfortunate the way things panned out for her, in the sense that, yes, she was a disappointment, but was she really given the proper preparation? I'd argue no, and it's one of the many what-if situations we could talk about. We could talk about NASCAR. That could be something you could fill an entire show on if you were so inclined. So I feel like that while Patrick did disappoint in some areas, at the same time she was a trailblazer in many ways, and we can only imagine how her career could have panned out if she was indeed given the proper preparation.
Yeah, I agree with you about that one. She will go down as one of the all-time, I hate to use the word flops, but she's looked at as a flop in NASCAR or even in sports history in a way. Because, a lot of people remember her. She was very, very hyped. Like, how Johnny Manziel was very, very hyped. And some of these other guys or girls in each of their sports are very, very hyped. So, that's how Danica will probably be remembered among, your typical person that watches SportsCenter, and not someone that follows NASCAR.
I hesitate to put the Manziel label on her, but I know what you're saying 100% for sure.
Yeah, that's the first name I came up with. Okay.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, so Manziel, it's funny that we transition to football now when I mentioned Johnny Manziel. The Super Bowl's tomorrow, in case you haven't heard. It's in Phoenix, the city where Kevin Durant just got traded to. It's the Eagles, and it's the Chiefs. It's a great game. Andy Reid against his old team. The Kelsey brothers going head-to-head. A lot of storylines. Who's your pick?
I think there's a lot of narratives for the Super Bowl. You're absolutely right. I think this is going to be one of those games where if I'm not exactly a gambler, but if I can offer any advice, I'd say bet the over. This is going to be one of those games. It reminds me a lot of the Eagles' last Super Bowl excursion against the Patriots those years back. Where I feel like it's going to be one of those games that is going to feature a lot of offense until it's decided by a single defensive play, something along the lines of what happened in that Super Bowl, and also something along the lines of what happened in that Chiefs-Rams game a couple years back. It's going to be one of those games that is just decided by a lot of scoring, but it's going to be one defensive play because, I always find it ironic that that this is an NFL that worships the deity known as fantasy football, and that lends itself to a bit of a preference for the offense, no matter how unspoken that may be. I mean, we're seeing teams post scores where some Arena Football League teams, hey, that's coming back, by the way, Arena Football League teams would blush, and they're still losing the game. So I feel that it's going to – but at the end of the day, defense still wins championships. We see it in blow action. I always like to bring up the example of when Seattle crushed Denver at the Meadowlands. Legion of Boom shut down the Peyton Manning-led offense of Denver back then, and it really worked to their advantage. So it's going to come down to to maybe one or two big defensive plays, and I think the team better equipped to do that, as well as take advantage of a somewhat hobbled quarterback, is Philadelphia. I think it's going to be high scoring, but I know it's unfortunate. I know you're a huge Giant fan, Madison. But hey, blame me too. I've had a few run-ins with Eagles fans myself over the past few years. In my line of work, I've written about the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, and but I do think that this is going to be a Philadelphia victory. I will say 37-31. Eagles take this one.
I think it's going to be 26-23 Philly. Less scoring than people may think. I think the Eagles are the better team.
Yes.
I think the Chiefs have the better quarterback, obviously, but I look at better teams rather than the better quarterbacks. And I went with the better quarterback so many times over the years, and I'm not falling for that trap. Philly's better than the Chiefs. They've been the best team in football all season. And I'm going to say 26-23 Eagles, and I would not be stunned if that's the final score because of like a missed extra point or a missed field goal. Maybe there's a safety involved or a 2-point conversion. I think we're going to have a weird score of this game. I really do.
I like that.
Yeah, and by the way, you mentioned that Meadowlands Super Bowl. I was also at that Super Bowl.
Oh, my God. Wow. That's very cool. That's very Super Bowl is definitely on bucket list for me. I'd love to cover it, but attending it would be such a dream. But that's very cool, and I'm so jealous.
Yeah, sorry, I'm outside and somebody just walked by and said hi. It's okay. But yeah, I was at that Super Bowl, and it wasn't a great game, but it was a great experience, obviously. And I think I've mentioned that on the podcast to several of my guests. All right, it was a pleasure to have you on today. I'm doing another show in probably about a half an hour or so to do Super Bowl props, so make sure you and the guests listening and people listening check that out, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon.
I will indeed, Madison. You keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Have a good one.